When he was listening to music as a kid, he wasn't listening to the Jimi Hendrix and Guitar Hero bands and so on. He invented all that stuff.
Who is the best drummer ever?
He was the pioneer of a rock drummer. There was no context for him. There was no archetype. He is the archetype.
He personally is what drums are all about.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sitting beside a guy who is possibly the best rock and roll drummer on earth.
He is the N in rock and roll.
That's a fascinating thing. They could walk into a pop sound and play it. They could do rhythm and blues. They could do soul music. I guess they could have done classics if they'd had to. But they had the magic touch.
Behind every seismic shift in music, there was someone at the back of the stage holding it together, and often tearing it apart at the same time. These are the players whose influence can still be heard in every snare hit, every rolling tom fill, every eruption of noise that ever made a crowd lose its mind. They didn't just play rhythm, they defined it. They gave rock its muscle, its swagger, and its soul. This is the tale of those who belong on the mountain, the four faces of rhythm who form the Mount Rushmore of rock drummers.
Led Zeppelin didn't just redefine rock. They were the biggest band on earth for nearly a decade. Every member was extremely talented, but if you asked each and every one of them what the foundation of their music was, they'd all give the same answer.
When Led Zeppelin burst onto the scene in the late 1960s, their power was overwhelming. The guitars were heavy, the vocals primal, but it was the drumming that made everything feel seismic. At the center of that storm sat John Henry Bonham, a man who could hit harder than anyone alive, yet play with a groove that swung like a jazz master.
I'd like to introduce Led Zeppelin to you. On drums, John Bonham.
For those who played with him, he wasn't just keeping time, he was commanding it. Jimmy Page once said Bonham could make a drum kit sound like an orchestra.
And he played with his wrists. It's not all this forearm smashing, but he could also do an accent on the bass drum and you'd feel it, more or less in your gut.
Robert Plant described him as the band's engine, their thunder, their pulse. And for millions of listeners, that's exactly what he was.
Before he went any further, I said, wait a minute, there is no drummer on the planet to compare with John Bonham.
Bonham's playing was a contradiction of force and feel. He could strike the snare with the weight of a sledgehammer, yet his footwork on the bass drum was astonishingly nimble. In tracks like When the Levee Breaks, the sound of his drums became almost mythical. They were recorded in a stairwell at Headley Grange, with microphones placed high above to capture the echoing boom that no one had ever heard before.
This is the hall where drums were set up and where Levee Breaks was recorded. Yeah, you can hear the reflected surfaces.
That beat has been sampled and copied endlessly, from hip-hop to film soundtracks, but no one has ever replicated the combination of precision and fury that Bonham unleashed on that day.
When the levee breaks, have no place to stay.
His solos were legend. Moby Dick wasn't just a showpiece, it was a physical and emotional workout that could stretch over 20 minutes. Bonham attacked the drums with his bare hands until they bled, yet somehow kept perfect control. He could make a kit sound like it was breathing, inhaling during the quiet moments, exhaling in violent bursts.
John Bonham could do solos all day long, but he played for the song and not for himself. He rarely went outside of the structure of a song.
Audiences didn't just hear him, they felt him. There was something elemental about the way he played, as though he were tapping directly into the Earth's core.
Who is the best drummer ever?
It's just John Bonham.
John Bonham.
John Bonham.
John Bonham.
John Bonham.
John Bonzo Bonham was the #1 drummer.
I'm going to ask him a most important question here. John, we've been watching that bit film there, and you do some really it must have taken you years to learn to play like that, did it?
Not really.
Off stage, Bonham was both charming and unpredictable. Friends and bandmates described him as a warm, loyal man who loved his family deeply, but also someone capable of spectacular mischief. He once rode a motorbike down a hotel corridor in Los Angeles, laughed through smashed televisions, and drank enough to earn legendary status even by rock standards. Yet behind the bravado was a shy, humble man who saw himself simply as a drummer doing his job. In interviews, he rarely took credit. The fame, he said, belonged to the music. His colleagues worshipped him. Dave Grohl has called him the greatest rock drummer of all time. Phil Collins, no slouch himself, admitted he modeled his entire sound after Bonham's explosive grooves. And even now, decades later, young players sit behind their kits trying to summon that same controlled violence that made Led Zeppelin's rhythm section untouchable. But Bonham's brilliance came with a tragic fragility. By 1980, years of touring and excess had taken their toll.
John Bonham, drummer with the British rock group Led Zeppelin since its inception in 1968, was found dead today at the home of a friend in Windsor, England. Bonham was 32. A spokesman refused to give the cause of death pending an autopsy tomorrow.
After a marathon day of drinking during rehearsals for a new tour, he went to bed at Jimmy Page's house and never woke up. He was just 32 years old. When the news broke, the band didn't hesitate. Led Zeppelin announced they could not continue without him. Bonham wasn't just their drummer, he was their foundation. Without him, there was no Zeppelin. The impact of his death rippled through the entire music world. A man who had redefined what drums could do. His bronze statue in Redditch reads simply that his influence continues to resonate. And it's true. From stadiums to bedroom kits, his thunder still rolls on. Bonham remains the benchmark, the heartbeat of rock and roll. He was power and groove incarnate, the sound of an era condensed into a man. If Bonham was thunder, Ginger Baker was fire. Where Bonham relied on raw power, Baker channeled chaos through technical mastery. Born in South London and trained in jazz, he brought an entirely new vocabulary to rock music. His playing wasn't just about timekeeping, it was about conversation. Every hit, every roll, every cymbal crash seemed to argue with the melody, pushing and pulling the music in unexpected directions. When he co-founded Cream with Eric Clapton and Jack Bruce, he created a template that reshaped rock drumming forever. Baker didn't just play songs, he dissected them. In Cream's live performances, particularly in his marathon solo on Toad, he transformed the drum solo into a legitimate art form. Before Baker, solos were novelties. After him, they became statements.
And I just used to play solos. Used to sit on the drum kit and play it all day.
He was the first rock drummer to bring the improvisational spirit of jazz to the masses, and he did it with an aggression that left audiences stunned. He used two bass drums long before it was fashionable, experimenting with rhythms inspired by African and Latin music, often playing polyrhythms that confused even his bandmates. But as much as his drumming was groundbreaking, Baker himself was a contradiction, fiercely intelligent and endlessly combative.
Whose virtuosity has staggered the musical world. It was also Ginger Baker who enabled the other two to develop their free-form playing. His playing is fragmentary, but insistent, devious but relentless, meandering but precise.
His relationship with Jack Bruce was famously volatile. The two men could barely be in the same room without an argument, yet that tension created magic. The musical battles between Baker's drums and Bruce's bass became the heartbeat of Cream's sound. Clapton later said that the only reason the band worked was because Ginger and Jack were constantly trying to outplay each other. Baker's talent took him far beyond rock. After Cream, he joined Blind Faith with Clapton and Steve Winwood, but soon grew restless. In 1971, he embarked on one of the strangest and most ambitious journeys in rock history, driving from London to Lagos, Nigeria, to collaborate with Fela Kuti. There, immersed in the heat and rhythm of Africa, Baker jammed with local musicians, exploring the roots of rhythm itself. His encounters with Fela produced recordings that blended Western rock drumming with Afrobeat in ways no one had attempted before. It was a natural extension of his restless spirit, always searching, never satisfied. Despite his brilliance, Baker often seemed to sabotage his own career. His temper was infamous.
If they got a problem with me, come and see me and punch me on the nose. I ain't gonna sue you.
He's certifiably nuts. He's mad.
I think he was kind of fairly consistently horrible to people and to himself.
He's a rogue. He's a lovable rogue.
He fought with bandmates, managers, journalists, and sometimes fans. He dismissed entire genres, once declaring that heavy metal should have been aborted at birth, and never hesitated to insult fellow drummers. He famously said of John Bonham that he had no swing, a comment that angered Zeppelin fans but typified Baker's blunt honesty. Yet beneath the bluster was an undeniable genius who viewed drumming as a form of pure expression. He didn't care for popularity, he cared for perfection. In later life, Baker's story became even more eccentric. He moved from country to country, at one point living on an olive farm in Italy, where he became obsessed with polo.
These days, Ginger Baker gets up at dawn instead of going to bed. After 15 hell-raising years of irresponsible fame, he's trying on the lifestyle of a gentleman farmer, highly responsible for 10 horses. He never stops talking about horses.
British television filmed him in 1978, tending to his horses, declaring that drums and polo were the only things that made sense to him.
Polo happened. This is a big surprise to me at the time. And I saw some polo and immediately thought, oh, I'd like to look at this.
His health declined, but he never lost his ferocity. In his final years, as captured in the documentary Beware of Mr. Baker, he remained irascible and unpredictable, hitting interviewers with his cane one moment, recounting musical triumphs the next. Yet for all the chaos, his legacy is monumental. Without Ginger Baker, there would be no modern drum solo, no progressive rock drumming, and perhaps no recognition of the drummer as a frontline artist. He showed that drums could be melodic, emotional, and intellectual all at once. He made the instrument sing. As Stuart Copeland once said, Baker didn't just play rock, he split it open and let something new pour out.
It's hard to find fault with the notion that he was the pioneer of a rock drummer. There was no context for him. There was no archetype. He is the archetype.
Ginger Baker's a motherfucker. That's it. He personally is what drums are all about.
While Bonham and Baker were commanding arenas, another man was quietly changing the course of music from behind closed doors. Hal Blaine never smashed a hotel room, rarely appeared on stage, and yet his drumming became the most heard sound in popular music.
If it weren't for Hal Blaine, there would be no wall of sound. His thunderous, drumming approach.
He wasn't a rock star, he was a craftsman. As part of the Wrecking Crew, a group of elite Los Angeles session musicians, Blaine played on thousands of recordings. From Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra to the Beach Boys and Simon and Garfunkel, he was everywhere, though few listeners knew his name. Blaine's genius lay in subtlety.
Simon and Garfunkel, during their heyday, I guess I did just about all the records, up through and including Bridge Over Troubled Water, which ends that particular tape that you're listening to. One of the great records.
He could adapt to any artist, any style, any mood. His timing was impeccable, his instincts razor sharp. He had an uncanny ability to know exactly what a song needed, even when the songwriter didn't. The iconic drum beat that opens Be My Baby by the Ronettes, Boom Ba Boom Boom, was actually a mistake. Blaine dropped his stick during a take, creating an unplanned rhythm. Rather than stop, he kept going, and the producer loved it. That accident became one of the most recognizable beats in pop history, copied endlessly by everyone from the Beatles to Billy Joel.
A little less fight, a little more smart. Close your mind and open up your heart. Satisfy me. Satisfy me, baby.
Working with Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, Blaine became the backbone of California's Sunshine Sound. On songs like Good Vibrations and I Get Around, his drumming wasn't flashy, but it was perfect, crisp, inventive, and full of life. Wilson called him the greatest drummer who ever lived.
When it comes to drums that stand out in records, to me, and only to me, I guess, the two that stand out were both yours. One is the opener to Be My Baby, boom, boom, boom.
That was
I
the
guess
one.
you could do it better than me. And the single drum beat at the opener for what Beach Boys?
Wouldn't It Be Nice?
Wouldn't it be nice for it to tinkle and it goes, BAM! There's just this sound. It's
One big smack.
One big smack. Were there many takes on that one drum beat?
I don't think so. Although Brian used to like to do a lot of takes, I think because Phil Spector used to do a lot of takes.
He played on Sinatra's Strangers in the Night, Simon and Garfunkel's Mrs. Robinson, and Elvis's Can't Help Falling in Love. By some counts, he appeared on over 40 #1 singles and 150 top 10 hits. It's an almost unimaginable achievement, the soundtrack of an entire generation, held together by one man's quiet precision. Despite his extraordinary success, Blaine never behaved like a star. He was humble, witty, and endlessly professional. He used to say that if you made a mistake, you should repeat it twice, so everyone thinks it's intentional.
When we made records in those days, gentlemen, we made them not to be so intricate and perfect that they were absolutely perfect. We made them to feel good.
Producers loved him because he could turn an average song into a hit within minutes. Fellow musicians adored him for his warmth and humor. He wasn't in it for fame, he was in it for the groove. As the 1970s rolled on, the music world changed. Drum machines began to replace live players, and the demand for session musicians declined. Blaine went through lean years, even taking work as a security guard for a time. But the industry never forgot him. In the 1990s, he began receiving the recognition he deserved, with inductions into both the Rock and Roll and the Musicians Hall of Fame. When he died in 2019 at the age of 90, tributes poured in from across the industry. The Beach Boys, the Monkees, and countless drummers called him the Invisible Giant, the man whose touch could turn rhythm into gold. Hal Blaine's legacy isn't defined by one band or one style, it's defined by universality. He proved that you didn't need fame to shape history. He made perfection sound effortless, and in doing so, taught every drummer that sometimes less truly is more. In a world of loud egos and louder amplifiers, he kept his head down, kept the tempo steady, and quietly became one of the most important musicians who ever lived. Then there was Mitch Mitchell, the youngest of the four, and perhaps the most technically daring. Where Bonham was thunder and Baker was fire, Mitchell was lightning. Fast, unpredictable, illuminating everything around him. As the drummer for the Jimi Hendrix Experience, he found himself paired with one of the most revolutionary guitarists in history, and somehow he matched him note for note. Their interplay was more than rhythm and melody. It was conversation, a musical duel played in perfect harmony. Mitchell came from a jazz background. He grew up idolizing players like Max Roach and Elvin Jones, and that influence bled into everything he did. When he joined Hendrix in 1966, reportedly winning the job on a coin toss, he brought a lightness and flexibility that made the experiences sound unlike anything else in rock.
I was recorded like about 3 weeks after we got together. You know, like we were just thrown together. You know, we weren't friends, we'd never met or anything. It's one of those things, three guys being thrown together and sort of, there you are, you're a group now, and see what you can sort out, you know.
He could swing within chaos, making even the wildest jams feel fluid. On songs like Fire and Manic Depression, his drumming turned simple riffs into complex musical dialogues. Every crash, every roll, was part of a conversation with Jimmy's guitar. Live, their chemistry was astonishing. Hendrix once said he never played the same solo twice, and Mitchell responded in kind, never playing the same fill twice. In concert, they fed off each other's energy. Hendrix's guitar screams answered by Mitchell's furious rolls, crescendos building and collapsing like waves. On stage, the two of them seemed to speak their own language. Watching them was like witnessing two magicians conjuring sound from thin air. But Mitchell was more than Hendrix's sideman. He was a visionary drummer in his own right. His sense of timing was unconventional, his fills unpredictable, and his technique effortless. He used traditional grip, like a jazz drummer, even in the loudest moments. His double strokes, cymbal flourishes, and ghost notes created textures that made the experience's music feel alive and breathing. Stuart Copeland of the Police once said that it was a travesty Mitch was remembered merely as Hendrix's drummer, that in truth, Hendrix was Mitch's guitarist. It's an exaggeration, but not by much. In the studio, Mitchell was just as inventive. On Electric Ladyland, his drumming became more experimental, weaving between funk, blues, and psychedelia with ease. He could turn a 3-minute song into a journey. During the recording of Voodoo Child, Hendrix and Mitchell jammed for hours, exploring grooves until they found perfection. The final take remains one of rock's most electrifying moments, and it's as much Mitchell's doing as Hendrix's. His interplay gives the track its tension and release, its sense of danger and exhilaration. After Hendrix's death in 1970, Mitchell struggled to find purpose. He played in a few bands, worked on sessions, but nothing could recapture the alchemy of the experience. He continued to perform occasionally, especially in tribute shows, but his legacy was already sealed.
This great towering, this monument of drums was Jimi Hendrix's drummer. Well, how would you describe him? Well, Jimmy was Mitch's guitarist.
When he passed away in 2008, while on tour honoring Hendrix's music, it felt like the final note of a story that began in 1966. He had been the last surviving member of the experience, and with his passing, an era truly ended. Mitchell's influence can be heard everywhere, in the fluid playing of Ian Paice from Deep Purple, the jazzy freedom of Neil Peart, and even in the sharp, syncopated drumming of Stuart Copeland himself. He taught rock drummers that they could be artists, not just accompanists. He turned rhythm into dialogue, percussion into poetry. More than anyone, he showed that the drums could dance. John Bonham, Ginger Baker, Hal Blaine, and Mitch Mitchell, 4 men who couldn't have been more different, yet together defined what it meant to be a rock drummer. Bonham brought unstoppable power, Baker brought fearless innovation, Blaine brought quiet perfection, Mitchell brought freedom. Each one left an imprint that time can't erase. They didn't just keep the beat, they set it, and every drummer since, knowingly or not, has followed in their footsteps. While living in Italy, Ginger Baker had some run-ins with the local mafia. If you want to see what happened, click the thumbnail on screen.